The motion sensor on Marcus Reed's phone buzzed at 3:15 p.m. on a Saturday afternoon. Through the security camera feed, he watched 3 neighborhood kids vault his fence and cannonball into his pool again. For 6 weeks, the 42-year-old software engineer had endured this. 6 weeks of finding his pool chemicals disrupted, his pool furniture moved, his privacy shattered. The police said it was a civil matter. The parents claimed their kids would never. But Marcus had documentation now. Names, addresses, patterns. And today, he wasn't calling anyone. Today, Marcus was done playing nice stop before we dive into how Marcus turned a simple pool into the ultimate lesson in property rights. If you love stories where entitled behavior meets creative consequences, hit that like button and subscribe. Now, let's see exactly how this unfolded. This is a story in 3 parts. The violation that pushed a reasonable man past his breaking point, the confrontation where preparation met opportunity, and the resolution where a neighborhood learned that kindness has limits. Marcus Reed had done everything right. He'd invested in his dream home, built the pool he'd wanted since childhood, worked hard to maintain it. But when the Hendersons moved in next door with their entitled attitude and 3 unsupervised kids, Marcus's sanctuary became someone else's playground. Week after week, he came home to evidence of trespassing. His requests were met with dismissal. His documentation was met with accusations of overreacting. The toll it took wasn't just financial. It was the violation of knowing that his boundaries meant nothing to people who believed their convenience outweighed his rights. The confrontation would come on a sweltering July afternoon when Marcus finally had enough evidence to act. What the Hendersons didn't know was that the quiet software engineer had spent weeks researching, planning, and preparing for the moment when their kids would trespass one time too many. The power shift would be absolute and undeniable. The resolution would prove that sometimes justice doesn't come from authorities. It comes from understanding exactly how far you're legally allowed to go. Here's exactly how it happened. Marcus Reed had purchased a split-level ranch house in Maple Grove, Ohio 3 years ago, right after his divorce was finalized. At 42, the software engineer who worked remotely for a cybersecurity firm had wanted something that felt like his own. Place where he could decompress after 12-hour days staring at code. The pool had been his dream feature. Not enormous, but pristine, a 20 by 40 foot rectangle with LED lighting, a salt water system he'd researched for months, and comfortable lounge furniture he'd saved up to buy. He maintained it meticulously, checking pH levels every other day, skimming leaves each morning with his coffee. It was his meditation, his reward for years of stress. When the Hendersons moved in next door that spring, Marcus had been neighborly. He'd waved at Linda Henderson, a sharp-featured woman in her late 30s who wore athleisure-like armor and drove a white Escalade with dealer plates still attached. Her husband Derek worked in pharmaceutical sales and traveled constantly. Their 3 kids, Bryce, 14, Madison, 12, and Connor, 10, had the run of the neighborhood from the moment they arrived. The first incident happened on a Tuesday in early June. Marcus came home from a grocery run to find wet footprints on his deck and his pool gate hanging open. 3 pairs of wet shoes sat by his back door. Confused, he checked his security camera footage and felt his stomach drop. The Henderson kids, all 3 of them, had been in his pool for over an hour. They'd used his towels, drunk from his outdoor refrigerator, and left candy wrappers floating in the water. Marcus had assumed it was a misunderstanding. Maybe they thought the previous owner had given permission. Maybe they didn't realize the property had sold. He'd walked next door that evening. Linda Henderson had answered the door with a phone pressed to her ear, barely making eye contact. When Marcus politely explained what happened and asked her to talk to her kids about respecting property lines, she'd waved him off. "Kids will be kids," she'd said, already closing the door. "I'm sure it was just a mistake. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just dismissal." 2 weeks later, it happened again. This time on a Saturday afternoon when Marcus was inside working on an urgent security patch. He only discovered it when he went out to check his chemical levels and found the pool cloudy. The chlorine dispenser empty, and someone had cranked his pool heater to maximum. His electric bill would spike. But worse was finding his expensive Bluetooth speaker, the one he bought himself for his birthday, sitting at the bottom of the pool, completely ruined. The Henderson kids had apparently tried to have a pool party with music and hadn't bothered to keep the electronics away from the water. Marcus marched next door, speaker in hand, water still dripping. This time Derek Henderson answered, tie loosened, clearly just home from a trip. When Marcus showed him the speaker and explained the pattern, Derek had actually laughed. Dude, it's just a pool. We're getting one installed next month anyway. Consider it us test driving the neighborhood amenities. The casual dismissal, the assumption that Marcus's property was community property, made his hands shake with suppressed anger. The breaking point came on July 4th weekend. Marcus had taken a rare vacation day to relax by his pool, the one he'd worked for, paid for, maintained. He'd been inside making lunch when he heard splashing and voices. Lots of voices. Through his kitchen window, he watched in disbelief as the Henderson kids had brought 5 friends over. 8 children were in his pool, unsupervised, screaming and roughhousing. His brand new pool float, a luxury lounger he bought just that week, was already torn. Something inside Marcus went cold and calculating. He pulled out his phone and started recording. He documented everything, the time, the kids' faces, the damage. Then he went back inside and started researching. If the police wouldn't help, if the parents wouldn't listen, then Marcus would find another way. He spent the next 2 weeks learning everything he could about the Henderson family, where Linda went for her morning yoga, where the kids went to school, Derek's company, their social media accounts, their scheduled pool installation date, July 20th. Marcus smiled at his computer screen. He had until July 20th to make his point. And on July 18th, when the Henderson kids inevitably came back one more time, Marcus would be ready. Everything was finally in place. July 18th arrived hot and humid, the kind of oppressive Saturday where every family in the neighborhood would be looking for ways to cool off. Marcus had taken the day off. He prepared everything the night before. At 2:30 p.m., right on schedule according to the pattern he documented, his security alert pinged. Through his phone, he watched Bryce, Madison, and Connor Henderson climb over his fence, towels in hand, acting like they owned the place. But this time, Marcus had made modifications. The night before, he'd added something special to his pool: 40 gallons of industrial bubble bath concentrate, the kind used for foam parties and theatrical effects. He'd tested the formula carefully. It wouldn't harm anyone, wouldn't damage the pool, but it would create a spectacular, sticky, absolutely unswimmable mess the moment the water was disturbed. He'd also positioned 3 additional cameras with crystal clear audio recording capability. Everything about today would be documented. Marcus waited until all 3 Henderson kids were in the water. He watched through his window as Bryce cannonballed in first. The reaction was immediate and glorious. The water erupted into thick, sudsy foam that multiplied with every movement. Within seconds, the kids were waist-deep in bubbles that stuck to their skin, their hair, their swimsuits. They started laughing at first, thinking it was fun. Then the bubbles got in Madison's eyes. Connor started coughing. Bryce tried to get out but slipped on the foam-covered deck. That's when Marcus walked outside, phone in hand, recording everything. "Afternoon, kids," he said, his voice calm and level. All 3 Henderson children froze. The laughter died. Bryce, the oldest, tried to recover with bravado. "Dude, what's in your pool?" "This is disgusting." Marcus smiled. "It's my pool." Bryce Matthew Henderson, age 14, student at Maple Grove Middle School. "That's what's in my pool. My property. My chemicals. My choice." He watched Bryce's face go pale as Marcus pulled out a tablet and started reading. "Would you like me to continue?" "Because I can." Madison Elizabeth Henderson, age 12, same school volleyball team. Connor James Henderson, age 10, Ridgeview Elementary, Mrs. Patterson's class. Madison started crying, Bubbles still clinging to her hair. How do you know all that? Because unlike your parents, I do my research when someone repeatedly violates my property, Marcus said, his voice still eerily calm. He turned the tablet around to show them. 6 weeks of documentation, time-stamped videos of every single trespass, screenshots of their mother's social media posts about neighborhood pool access and community sharing, photos of the damage they caused, receipts for everything they've broken or ruined. I know your dad works for Morrison Pharmaceuticals. I know your mom teaches yoga at Saga Studio on Maple Street. I know your family's pool installation got delayed until August 5th because of permit issues. Bryce tried to climb out of the pool, but his hands kept slipping on the foam-covered ladder. You can't do this. This is entrapment or something. Actually, Marcus said, pulling up another document on his tablet, this is called protecting my property. And here's what's going to happen. You three are going to go home, covered in bubble bath, and you're going to tell your parents exactly what happened. Then your parents are going to call me. And when they do, I'm going to give them 2 options. Connor, the youngest, was shivering despite the heat. What options? Marcus crouched down so he was eye level with the kids, still recording. Option 1. I call the police right now with 6 weeks of documented trespassing. In Ohio, criminal trespass is a 4th-degree misdemeanor. That means potential charges, potential fines, potential juvenile records. Then I file a civil suit for property damage. I have receipts totaling $847 for items your family has damaged or destroyed. I will also pursue legal fees. Or, Madison whispered, Option 2. Your parents pay for every single item you damage, issue a written apology, and agree to a legally binding no-contact agreement regarding my property. They have 48 hours to decide. The documentation goes to my lawyer Monday morning either way, but if they choose option 2 and comply fully, I won't press criminal charges. Bryce tried one more angle. My dad will end you, man? He knows lawyers. Marcus stood up, turning off his recording. Your dad can call any lawyer he wants. I work in cybersecurity, Bryce. I document everything. I encrypt everything. And I have backups in 3 locations, including cloud storage your dad's lawyers can't touch. Now get out of my pool and go home. Your parents have until 6 p.m. Monday. He watched as the 3 kids struggled out of the foam-covered pool, slipping and sliding, covered head to toe in sticky bubbles. They looked miserable, humiliated, and finally afraid. As they scrambled back over the fence, Marcus called out one last time. And kids? Don't bother rinsing off at home. Bubble bath formula like this? It takes about 5 washes to fully remove. Enjoy explaining that to everyone you see this weekend. Marcus watched him disappear, then looked down at his pool, a churning mass of bubbles that would take him 3 hours to drain and clean. Worth every minute. He pulled out his phone and smiled for the first time in weeks. Now he'd wait and see if the Hendersons were smart enough to take the easy way out. The call came at 7:47 p.m. that same evening. Marcus was on his deck, watching the sun set while his pool pump worked overtime draining the bubble bath solution, when his phone rang. Derek Henderson. Marcus let it ring 4 times before answering, putting it on speaker so his own recording app could capture everything. You son of a... Derek started. But Marcus cut him off immediately. I'm recording this call. Derek, might want to watch your language if you're planning to claim I threatened or harassed your family. The silence on the other end was satisfying. Marcus continued, his voice professional and detached. I assume you're calling about my conversation with your children this afternoon. You traumatized my kids. Linda's voice screeched in the background. Madison cried for an hour. Your kids trespassed on my property for the 14th documented time in 6 weeks, Marcus replied calmly. What I did was completely legal. Bubble bath solution is non-toxic, causes no lasting harm, and I'm well within my rights to add whatever I want to my private pool on my private property. What your children did repeatedly is criminal trespass. So let's talk about those two options. There was muffled arguing on the other end. Then Derek came back on, his voice tight. We're not paying you a dime. We'll see you in court. Marcus had expected this. That's your choice. I'll have the documentation to the Maple Grove Police Department by 9 a.m. Monday, and my lawyer will file the civil suit by noon. Fair warning, though, I work from home, Derek. I've documented every single instance. Timestamps, video footage, photo evidence, receipts, witness statements from 2 other neighbors who've seen your kids in my yard. Judge Michelle Brennan handles property disputes in this district. She's very particular about respecting property rights. You looked up the judge? Derek's voice had lost some of its confidence. I told you. I work in cybersecurity. Research is literally what I do. Marcus took a sip of his water, letting the silence stretch. But here's what I didn't mention this afternoon. I also found something interesting while documenting your children's activities. Your HOA has a very specific rule about unsupervised minors in or around pools. Section 7, Article 3. Homeowners can be fined up to $500 per incident if their children are found using neighborhood facilities without adult supervision. I counted 14 incidents. That's $7,000 in potential HOA violations. I wonder if the board knows. The silence on the other end was absolute. Marcus pressed his advantage. So here's a revised option 2. You pay the $847 in damages by Monday at 5 p.m. You sign a notarized agreement that your family will not access my property. And I don't submit my documentation to the HOA board. Your call. This is extortion, Linda hissed. No, Marcus corrected. This is me offering to resolve this without involving multiple legal entities. Extortion would be if I was demanding something I'm not entitled to. I'm entitled to compensation for my damaged property. I'm entitled to prevent future trespassing. I'm being generous by not pursuing the full legal remedies available to me. More muffled arguing. Then Derek's voice, defeated. Fine, we'll pay, but you stay away from our family. Gladly, Marcus said. I'll email you the itemized list, my Venmo information, and the no-contact agreement template. Payment and signed. Documents by Monday, 5 p.m., or everything goes to the authorities. Have a nice evening. He hung up before they could respond. The next morning, Sunday, Marcus was cleaning his pool when he noticed Linda Henderson watching from her upstairs window. She disappeared quickly when she saw him look up. Monday at 4:47 p.m., his Venmo alert pinged $847 from Derek Henderson. At 4:53 p.m., an email arrived with the signed agreement. Notarized that afternoon, Marcus printed it, filed it with his documentation, and sent a confirmation email. Received. Matter resolved. Have a good summer. 2 months later, Marcus was floating on his new pool lounger on a perfect September afternoon. The Hendersons' pool had finally been installed, and he could hear their kids playing in their own backyard. Not once had they looked toward his fence. Word had spread through the neighborhood about what happened, the story told and retold, growing slightly with each version, but always with the same conclusion. Marcus Reed was not someone you mess with. His neighbor from the other side, Tom, stopped by with a 6-pack. Pool's looking good, Marcus. Stays that way when people respect boundaries, Marcus replied. Accepting a beer. Tom laughed. I heard Linda Henderson tried to file a complaint with the HOA about you. She did. They laughed her out of the meeting when I showed them my documentation. Marcus took a long drink, watching the afternoon light dance on the water. Turns out 14 violations of their own rules didn't paint her in the best light. Think they learned their lesson? Marcus glanced at the Henderson house. Through their pool fence, he could see Bryce helping his younger siblings clean up pool toys, Derek supervising closely. I think they learned that entitlement works until it meets preparation. And that assuming someone won't defend what's theirs is a costly mistake. As Tom left and the sun began to set, Marcus did something he hadn't done in months. He relaxed completely. His pool was his again. His property was his again. His peace was his again. The security cameras were still running. He wasn't naive enough to drop his guard completely, but the Henderson kids hadn't come within 10 feet of his fence line since that bubble bath afternoon. Marcus had learned something too. Sometimes justice doesn't come from a badge or a courtroom. Sometimes it comes from refusing to be a victim, from documenting everything, and from understanding exactly how far you're legally allowed to go. And as Marcus floated there in the cooling evening air, his pool pristine and private once more, he smiled. Because justice, whether served with a gavel or a gallon of bubble bath, was equally satisfying when you were the one in control. Across the country in Portland, Oregon, retired patent attorney Catherine Wu was tending her prize-winning roses when her new neighbor demanded she remove the eyesore garden to improve property values. Catherine smiled, the same smile that had once dismantled corporate legal teams and pulled out the original 1947 deed with the permanent garden easement she discovered in her title search. "Please, keep making demands," she said quietly. "I'd love to explain property law to someone who clearly skipped that day." The neighbor went pale. "But that's a story for another time."